Young woman discovers a mysterious house in the mountains, and the secret inside changes everything. Sarah Mitchell never imagined that the inheritance left by her Aunt Grace would completely change her life. The rural property in St. Thomas Ridge had only been mentioned briefly in the will, and she decided to visit it to decide whether to sell or keep the place. It was during her first walk around the grounds that something unexpected caught her attention. An almost imperceptible trail covered by dense vegetation led in a direction that wasn't on any of the property maps. Curiosity got the better of caution. Sarah followed the steep trail, breathing heavily as she climbed the mountainside. The path was treacherous, with loose stones and exposed roots threatening to trip her with every step. After almost an hour of walking, she stopped abruptly. Before her opened an impressive precipice, cut by a dense fog rising from the valley. But what truly took her breath away was the suspension bridge that stretched through the mist, connecting her position to a rock formation on the other side. On the opposite side of the chasm, partially hidden by the fog, was a structure that seemed to defy all laws of physics and common sense. An old wooden house was literally embedded in the vertical rock face, as if someone had decided to build a residence in the most unthinkable place possible. Sarah stood still for several minutes, trying to process what she was seeing. How was it possible that no one in the family had ever mentioned this extraordinary building? Her Aunt Grace was always detailed when talking about the property, but never said a word about that mysterious house. The suspension bridge swayed gently in the mountain wind. The wooden planks looked old, some visibly damaged by time and weather. The ropes supporting the structure were faded, but still appeared to have enough strength to support a person's weight. Sarah cautiously approached the bridge entrance. A small metal plaque, corroded by rust, was nailed to the first post. The letters were almost illegible, but she could make out some words. Private, passage, danger. She looked at the chasm again. The drop had to be at least 50 meters, maybe more. The valley below was completely covered by fog, making any precise estimate of the depth impossible. The wind produced a low, constant sound as it passed through the rock formations, creating an almost supernatural atmosphere. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. Despite the fear she felt, Sarah couldn't walk away. There was something about that house that drew her in inexplicably, as if an invisible force was pulling her toward the mystery. She carefully tested the first plank of the bridge, applying weight gradually. The wood groaned but held. Taking a deep breath, she took the first step over the abyss. The bridge swayed alarmingly, making her stomach turn. Sarah gripped the side ropes hard enough to turn her knuckles white. Each following step was a struggle against the panic growing in her chest. The wind seemed stronger in the middle of the crossing, making the structure swing from side to side. When she finally reached the other side, her legs were trembling so much that she had to sit for a few minutes to recover. The feeling of relief at having crossed safely was quickly replaced by a new wave of awe and bewilderment as she observed the house up close. The construction was even more impressive from that perspective. Part of the structure was literally carved into solid rock, while other sections jutted out over the cliff, supported by thick wooden beams anchored in natural crevices of the stone. It was a feat of engineering that bordered on the impossible, especially considering it must have been built with the tools and techniques of decades past. The front door was made of solid wood, with hand-carved details depicting leaves and flowers. An old key hung on a hook beside the entrance, as if someone expected it to be found. Sarah hesitated for a moment before taking it. Would it be trespassing? But technically, that land now belonged to her, didn't it? The key fit perfectly into the lock, turning with a soft click that echoed in the mountain silence. The door opened with a prolonged creak, revealing the interior of the mysterious house. What Sarah saw left her completely speechless. The inside of the house was like a time capsule preserved intact for decades. Dark wood furniture was covered with white sheets that had yellowed with time. Dust particles danced in the sunbeams, streaming through the small windows set directly into the rock. The air had a peculiar smell, a mix of old wood, dampness, and something she couldn't identify. Perhaps lavender or some other old-fashioned scent. She walked slowly through the main room, lifting some of the sheets to reveal well-preserved furniture. A colonial-style armchair, a coffee table with turned legs, a bookshelf filled with dusty books. Everything seemed to have been abandoned suddenly, as if the occupants had simply vanished one day, leaving everything exactly as it was. The walls were decorated with framed photographs, mostly in black and white or sepia. Sarah moved closer to examine the faces in the pictures. They were people she didn't recognize, men and women dressed in clothing from bygone eras, children playing in gardens, couples posing formally for family portraits. One photograph in particular caught her attention. It was a portrait of a young woman with dark hair, wearing a floral dress typical of the 1950s. There was something familiar about her face, but Sarah couldn't pinpoint what it was. The photo frame had a small silver plaque engraved with a name, Mary Grace Mitchell, 1952. The surname was the same as her family's, but Sarah had never seen that photograph before. Her Aunt Grace had had grey hair for as long as she could remember, and she had always been a very reserved woman who rarely spoke about the past. Could it be that the young woman in the photo was her aunt in an earlier time? Intrigued, she began to explore the other rooms of the house. The master bedroom had a double bed with an old spring mattress, covered by a floral quilt that matched the window curtains. A wooden dressing table was positioned near the window, with an oval mirror reflecting the soft light coming from outside. On the dressing table were several personal items, a set of hairbrushes with silver handles, a small carved jewelry box, a few perfume bottles still with remnants of liquid at the bottom. Sarah opened the jewelry box and found some simple but well-preserved pieces: pearl earrings, a necklace with a heart-shaped pendant, a simple gold wedding band. What intrigued her most was a drawer in the dressing table that was locked. She pulled the handle several times, but the drawer wouldn't budge. She looked for a key nearby, but found nothing. The lock was small and delicate, the kind that could be easily opened with a hairpin or similar tool. Sarah decided to keep exploring before trying to force the drawer. The bathroom was surprisingly modern for a house that seemed to have been abandoned for so long. There was running water, though only a thin stream came from the faucet. The heating system obviously no longer worked, but the basic structure was intact. The kitchen was small but functional, with an old wood-burning stove that still had cold ashes in the combustion chamber. Dishes and utensils were stored in cabinets painted light blue. A small table by the window had a direct view of the misty valley below. In one of the kitchen drawers, Sarah found some old papers. Most were shopping receipts and paid bills, but there were also a few handwritten letters. She tried to read them, but the handwriting was difficult to decipher, and the ink had faded over time. She managed to make out a few isolated words. Miss you, memory, always in my heart. The most disturbing thing was that all the documents she could read had dates from the 1950s and early 1960s. If that house was being used back then, why had her family never mentioned its existence? And who lived there? Sarah returned to the main bedroom, determined to discover what was in the locked drawer. She found a hairpin forgotten on the dresser and tried to use it to pick the lock. After a few minutes of trying, she heard a soft click and the drawer opened. What she found inside made her blood run cold. The drawer contained several official documents: birth certificates, marriage certificates, and death certificates. But these weren't just any documents. They all had the names of people from the Mitchell family, including herself. But the dates were completely wrong. Her mother, Linda Mitchell's birth certificate showed a date 5 years earlier than what Sarah had always known to be true. Stranger still, there was a marriage certificate between her mother and a man named Marcus Harrison, a name Sarah had never heard before. According to the document, they were married in 1955 and had a daughter in 1956. But the most shocking document of all was her own birth certificate. According to the yellowed paper she held with trembling hands, she was not born in 1989 as she had always believed, but in 1985. And her parents were not Linda Mitchell and David Thompson, but Mary Grace Mitchell and Marcus Harrison. Sarah sat heavily on the bed trying to process the information. According to those documents, her Aunt Grace was actually her biological mother, and her parents were actually her aunt and uncle. But that made no sense at all. She was absolutely certain she was born in 1989, as she celebrated her birthday every year on that date. There were baby pictures of her, medical records, school documents, an entire documented life that began in 1989. Could those documents be fake, or was there some explanation she couldn't see? With her heart racing, Sarah took all the documents and put them in her bag. She needed to get out of that house and find answers. But before leaving, something else caught her attention. In one of the photographs on the wall, she noticed a detail that had gone unnoticed before. In the background of the image, partially visible, was the same house where she now stood. The photo showed a group of people at a picnic, and in the background, the suspension bridge and the house nestled in the rock were clearly visible. This meant other people knew about the existence of this place. The house wasn't a total secret, at least not to whoever had taken that photograph decades ago. Sarah removed the photo from the frame and turned it over. On the back, written in faded blue ink, was a message: Family Picnic, 1958. Mary, Marcus, Linda and little Jennifer playing in the secret valley. Jennifer. That was a name she had never heard in her family. But if that child was at the picnic in 1958, they would now be in their early 60s. Could they possibly still be alive? And who were they in relation to the Mitchell family? The questions multiplied in her mind faster than the possible answers. Sarah put the photograph away with the documents and left the house, carefully locking the door behind her. The crossing back over the suspension bridge was equally terrifying, but this time she was so absorbed in her thoughts that she barely noticed the swaying of the structure. When she finally reached the other side of the chasm, the sun was already setting behind the mountains. She had spent much more time in the mysterious house than she had imagined. The walk back to the main house on the property was done almost in the dark, but fortunately she had memorized the path. That night Sarah could not sleep. She kept turning the documents over in her hands, examining every detail, looking for clues that could explain the discrepancies. The papers seemed genuine. They had official stamps, notary signatures, seals that matched the indicated historical period. In the morning, she made a decision. She would go to the nearest town and look for the civil registry office. If those documents were real, there should be copies in the official archives, and if they were false, perhaps she could find out who had made them and why. St. Thomas Ridge was a small town where everyone knew everyone. Sarah had visited the place a few times as a child, always accompanied by her Aunt Grace, but she had never paid much attention to the local details. Now, walking along the cobblestone streets toward the registry office, she observed everything with new eyes. The registry office operated in an old building in the town center, with thick stone walls and small windows. The clerk who assisted her was a woman in her 60s, with grey hair pulled back in an impeccable bun. She wore reading glasses hanging from a golden chain, and had a serious but not hostile expression. Sarah explained that she was researching her family history and would like to consult some old records. The clerk, who introduced herself as Mrs. Dorothy, asked to see her identification and noted some information on a form. "Are you related to the late Grace Mitchell?" asked Mrs. Dorothy, looking up over her glasses. "Yes, she was my aunt. I inherited her property a few weeks ago." Mrs. Dorothy's expression changed subtly. There was something there: surprise, discomfort. Sarah couldn't quite interpret what she saw pass over the woman's face, but there was definitely a reaction. "I see," said Mrs. Dorothy slowly. "What kind of record would you like to consult?" Sarah decided to be strategic. Instead of showing the document she had found, she would ask general questions first to see what information she could obtain. "I would like to consult the birth certificate of my mother, Linda Mitchell. She was born around 1940. Mrs. Dorothy nodded and went to a large file cabinet at the back of the room. She spent several minutes searching among old folders until she found what she was looking for. When she returned, she carried a yellowed folder in her hands. "Here it is," she said, opening the folder. "Linda Mitchell, born March 15, 1939. Sarah felt a chill down her spine. The date was correct, 1939, not 1944 as she had always known. This meant the document found in the mountain house was right, and she had grown up her entire life with false information about her own family. "Is there anything else specific you would like to see?" asked Mrs. Dorothy, noticing Sarah's sudden pallor. Yes, Sarah swallowed hard. I'd like to see the birth certificate of Mary Grace Mitchell, my aunt. This time Mrs. Dorothy hesitated before searching the file. She gave Sarah a penetrating look, as if assessing something. Are you sure you want to see this document? The question was strange. Why would a clerk question someone's right to consult public family records? Yes, I am. Why do you ask? Mrs. Dorothy took a deep breath. Because some families keep secrets for good reasons, my dear. Sometimes it's better to let the past lie. What kind of secrets? I can't talk about that here. But if you really want to know the truth about your family, perhaps you should talk to people who knew your aunt more intimately. People who were here when things happened. Sarah felt she was getting close to something important. What people? Who could tell me about my aunt? Mrs. Dorothy looked around, checking no one else was nearby. She leaned forward and lowered her voice. Look for Mrs. Margaret, the retired midwife. She lives at 47 Flower Street, a blue house with an iron gate. She knew your aunt from a very young age. If anyone can tell the truth, it's her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. Sarah thanked her and left the records office with more questions than answers. Mrs. Dorothy's mysterious attitude had confirmed her suspicions that something important was being hidden about her family. But what exactly? Flower Street was one of the oldest in town, with well-preserved colonial houses and flower gardens. Number 47 was easily identifiable, painted light blue with an ornate black iron gate. The front garden was impeccably maintained, with rose bushes and hydrangeas in full bloom. Sarah rang the bell and waited. After a few moments, an elderly lady opened the door. She must have been over 70, with completely white hair tied in a loose bun, blue eyes still lively and intelligent. She wore a simple floral dress and a kitchen apron. Good afternoon. Are you Mrs. Margaret? Yes, I am, my dear. How can I help you? My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm the niece of Grace Mitchell, who passed away recently. Mrs. Dorothy from the records office told me you knew my aunt for a long time. Mrs. Margaret's expression changed immediately. She opened the door wider and motioned for Sarah to come in. Come in, come in. Let's talk inside. The house was small but cozy, decorated with antique furniture and family photographs. Mrs. Margaret led Sarah to the living room and offered coffee, which was gratefully accepted. So you're Sarah, said Mrs. Margaret, studying the young woman's face carefully. Grace talked about you a lot. She was always worried, always asking if she was making the right decisions. Right decisions about what? Mrs. Margaret sighed and settled into her favorite armchair. About when to tell the truth. About whether she should ever tell the truth. What truth? You really don't know, do you? They managed to keep the secret all these years. Mrs. Margaret shook her head. Grace always said that one day you'd find out on your own. It seems that day has come. Sarah took the documents from her bag and showed them to Mrs. Margaret. I found these in a hidden house on my aunt's property. These certificates say she was my biological mother, not my aunt. Mrs. Margaret examined the documents carefully, nodding slowly. They're real. I myself helped Grace hide them all these years. So it's true my aunt was really my mother. She was, my dear. And she was one of the bravest women I ever knew. What she did for you, the sacrifice she made, few would have the courage for such a thing. What sacrifice? Why lie to me my entire life? Mrs. Margaret stood up and went to an old dresser, from which she retrieved a yellowed cardboard box. I think the time has come for you to know the whole truth. But prepare yourself, because it's not an easy story to hear. She returned with the box and placed it on the coffee table. Inside were dozens of letters, old photographs, and more documents. Your mother, Grace, fell in love when she was only 18. The man was older, already married, very influential in the region. When she discovered she was expecting you, he pressured her to make other choices. But she refused. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Who was he? Marcus Harrison. You must have seen the name on the marriage certificate. They married in secret when Grace discovered the pregnancy, but the marriage was never publicly acknowledged. Mrs. Margaret took a photograph from the box. It was the same image Sarah had seen in the mountain house, but this copy was in better condition. This photo was taken during the only period they lived together as a family. It lasted just 2 years. What happened? Marcus had a very prosperous mining company. He was respected in the region, had political influence. When his partners discovered the secret marriage and the daughter, they gave him an ultimatum. Either he got rid of the situation, or he would lose everything. Sarah felt nausea growing. And he chose the business? It wasn't quite like that. Marcus truly loved Grace and you, but the pressure was enormous. There were threats not only to the business, but to the family's safety. Grace received anonymous warnings, had properties vandalized. They realized they couldn't live in peace if they remained together. Mrs. Margaret showed more photographs. Grace pregnant, Grace with a baby in her arms, Marcus holding a small child. They decided the only way to protect you would be to make an arrangement with your sister Linda, who was married but couldn't have children. So the parents who raised me always knew. They knew from the first day. David and Linda agreed to raise you as their own daughter officially. Grace publicly renounced motherhood and went back to being seen only as your spinster aunt. Marcus distanced himself completely to avoid raising suspicions. And the house in the mountains. Ah, the house. Mrs. Margaret smiled sadly. Grace built that place as a refuge. It was where she went when she felt the longing, where she kept the memories of the two of you together. Marcus helped her with the construction in the last months they were together. It was meant to be a place where the three of you could meet secretly. Did she go there often? Every year on your birthday. She'd spend the whole day there, alone with the memories. Sometimes I would accompany her. She cried a lot, but said she didn't regret the decision they made. Sarah was fighting back tears. Why did they never tell me the truth when I grew up? Why keep up the lie for so long? Because the threats never completely ceased. Marcus kept his word and never tried to get close publicly again, but there were people who still suspected. Grace was afraid that revealing the truth might bring trouble for you or for David and Linda. And now? Is Marcus still alive? Mrs. Margaret hesitated. He is. He lives here in the city, actually, in a big house in the hills. He never officially married after Grace left his life. But he... She stopped, as if she didn't know how to continue. But he what? He tried to get close to you over the years, discreetly. Grace would tell me that he sometimes appeared at your school events, graduations, always keeping his distance. He financially supported your studies through an anonymous scholarship. Sarah felt as if the ground were moving beneath her feet. He watched me? All these years? He watched and was proud. Grace said he followed every achievement of yours, every important step in your life. When you graduated from university, when you got your first job, he knew everything. That's very disturbing. Why didn't she tell me any of this before she died? Mrs. Margaret took a letter from the bottom of the box. She left this for you. Said that if you ever discovered the truth on your own, I should give you this letter. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakably her aunt's, or rather, her mother's. The letter was dated just 2 months before Grace's death. My dear daughter, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means you have finally discovered our secret. I ask forgiveness for all the years of lies, but I want you to know that every decision was made out of love and to protect you. Sarah continued reading with eyes full of tears. Grace explained in detail all the circumstances that led to the decision to hide the truth. She spoke of the love she felt for Marcus, of the constant fear they lived with during the early years, of the pain of having to give her daughter to her sister. Do not feel betrayed by those who loved you, the letter said. David and Linda raised you with as much affection as I would have. Marcus never forgot you for a single day, and I watched you grow from afar, proud of every step, every achievement. The most emotional part of the letter came at the end. I left the mountain house for you because I know your natural curiosity would lead you there. It is my way of finally bringing our family together and forcing us all to face the truth. The house holds more secrets. Look in the attic. There are things I kept for you all these years. Sarah folded the letter carefully. Mrs. Margaret, do you know where I can find Marcus? Yes, I do, but I must warn you of one thing. He is not in very good health. His heart is weak, and discovering that you know the truth could be a great shock to him. Still, I need to talk to him. I need to hear his version of the story." Mrs. Margaret nodded understandingly. "He lives on Maple Street, number 234, a yellow house with a huge garden in front. But perhaps it would be better to let him know you are coming to visit. I can call him if you wish." "Please call him. Tell him Grace's daughter would like to talk to him." While Mrs. Margaret made the call, Sarah looked at the photographs scattered on the table. There were so many images she had never seen. Grace young and radiant, Marcus smiling while holding a baby, moments of a happy family that was destroyed by circumstances. "He will see you," said Mrs. Margaret after hanging up the phone. "But he is very nervous. He wasn't sure this day would ever come." Sarah said goodbye to Mrs. Margaret with a tight hug and headed toward Marcus's house. The journey seemed endless, her mind buzzing with questions and conflicting emotions. She was about to meet her biological father for the first time, at least consciously. The house on Maple Street was exactly as Mrs. Margaret had described, large, painted a light yellow, with a meticulously cared-for garden. Sarah could see roses, orchids, and several other flowers she didn't recognize. There were also some fruit trees and a small vegetable garden in the back. She rang the doorbell with her heart racing. Slow footsteps approached the door, and she heard the sound of several locks being opened. When the door finally opened, Sarah found herself face to face with a man of about 70, with graying hair, brown eyes that were exactly like her own. Marcus Harrison was shorter than she had imagined, but still maintained a dignified posture despite his age. He wore simple but well-kept clothes, and his hands were calloused from a lifetime of working with heavy materials. But what stood out most was the expression on his face, a mixture of joy, sadness, and fear. "Sarah," he said, and his voice trembled slightly. "You've grown so much. You look so beautiful." "Hello, Marcus." She couldn't call him father right away. "May I come in?" Of course. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I never thought this moment would come." He led her to a comfortable living room. The walls were covered with shelves full of books, and there were several plants scattered around. But what caught Sarah's attention most was a side table dedicated entirely to photographs. And they were all of her. There were pictures from every stage of her life: the first day of school, graduations, family trips with David and Linda, school awards, her college graduation, even recent photos she didn't remember being taken. "You really kept up with me all these years," she said, more as a statement than a question. Marcus nodded, clearly embarrassed. "I know it might seem invasive, but it was the only way I could be part of your life. Grace would send me some photos, and I hired people to take others at public events. That's quite disturbing. I know, and I apologize, but you have to understand, I gave up everything to protect you. The only comfort I had was being able to see you grow and become the wonderful woman you are today." Sarah sat in an armchair, still processing everything. "Tell me, the whole story, from the beginning. I want to hear your side of the facts." Marcus took a deep breath and settled on the sofa. "I met Grace at a summer festival in 1954. She was 18 and I was 28. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, but it wasn't just that. She was smart, funny, had dreams and ambitions. I fell head over heels in love." "But you were married." "I was. A marriage arranged by our families with no love on either side. My wife and I lived like strangers in the same house. When I met Grace, I understood for the first time what it was to truly love someone." "And her? Did she return your feelings?" Marcus smiled nostalgically. "She did. We started meeting secretly. She worked as a teacher at the local school, and I always found an excuse to pass by there. They were the happiest months of my life. Until she got pregnant. Yes. When we found out, my first reaction was pure joy. We would finally have a real family. I filed for divorce immediately and married Grace in secret in a neighboring town. But something went wrong." Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden. "My business partners found out about the marriage. The company I had built wasn't just mine. I had investors, powerful people who didn't approve of behavior they considered immoral. What did they do? First, they tried to convince me to annul the marriage and send Grace away. When I refused, the threats started. They said I would lose everything I had built. Then, the threats became more serious. Marcus returned to the sofa, visibly disturbed by the memories. They started following Grace. She received anonymous calls saying something bad could happen to her or the baby if we stayed together. Someone broke the windows of the house we lived in. We found the car with slashed tires several times. Didn't you seek help? From whom? The town sheriff was the son-in-law of one of my partners. The mayor owed political favors to the same group. We had nowhere to run. And you decided to separate? Grace decided. I wanted to fight, face everyone, but she was pregnant and scared. She said she didn't want you to be born into an environment of threats and violence. She chose to sacrifice our happiness to ensure your safety. Marcus stood up again and went to an old desk in the corner of the room. From a locked drawer, he took out a small metal box. I kept a few things from the few months we lived together, he said, returning with the box. I wanted you to see. Inside the box were several letters written by Grace, photos of the couple in intimate moments, some simple mementos like movie tickets and dried flowers. But there was also something that moved Sarah deeply, a small blue crocheted baby bootie. Grace made this for you when she was pregnant, explained Marcus. She would spend hours making little clothes and organizing the room we had prepared. We dreamed of your arrival every day. What happened after I was born? They were the two most painful and happiest years of my life at the same time. Grace went to live in the mountain house which we built together as our refuge. I visited whenever I could, usually at night or on weekends. You were such a happy baby, always smiling. Marcus paused to wipe his eyes, clearly emotional. But the pressures continued. My business was suffering, some important contracts were mysteriously cancelled, and the threats against Grace intensified after you were born. What kind of threats? They said something could happen to you if we kept living together. Grace couldn't sleep properly, she lived in fear. That's when she had the idea of asking Linda for help. How was that decision made? The hardest of our lives. Grace cried for weeks. I tried to convince her for us to flee the city, start a new life somewhere else, but she believed they would be able to find us anywhere. Marcus opened a photo album that was inside the box. The images showed the first 2 years of Sarah's life, a happy baby playing with her mother and father in various everyday situations. Linda and David were understanding. They really wanted children and agreed to the proposal of raising you as their own. But it was established that the secret should be kept forever, for your protection. And you really never tried to get close again. I tried a few times when you were a child. I would show up at parks where Linda took you to play, watching from a distance. But Grace found out and was desperate. She said I was putting everything at risk. And then? Then I learned to love you from afar. Grace would send me news, some photos. When you needed money for university, I paid anonymously through a fictitious foundation. It was my way of contributing to your future. Sarah was wrestling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she felt enormous anger for having been deprived of knowing her real father. On the other, she was beginning to understand the complexity of the situation he and Grace had faced. Where are these people now? The ones who threatened you? Most are dead. Business changed. The city changed. You probably could have grown up normally with me and Grace if we had waited a few more years, but at the time we had no way of knowing that. Do you regret the decision? Marcus thought for a long moment before answering. I regret not fighting more. I regret letting other people destroy our family, but I don't regret prioritizing your safety. You grew up happy and well cared for. You became an independent and successful woman. Perhaps things turned out as they should have. Was Grace happy? Not in the way she could have been if we were together, but she found joy in following your life, even if from a distance. We spoke regularly, especially on your birthdays. She would tell me about each of your achievements with such pride. Marcus stood up and went to a bookshelf, from which he retrieved a larger box. Grace gave me this shortly before she died. She said if you ever discovered the truth, I should give it to you. The box contained dozens of letters that Grace had written to Sarah over the years but never delivered. Birthday letters, Christmas letters, graduation letters, letters for important celebrations. It was as if she had kept a constant diary of the life they couldn't share. Sarah opened one of the letters at random. It was dated from her 10th birthday. "My dear daughter," the letter began, "today you turn 10, and I cannot be by your side to sing happy birthday. Linda told me you got a new bicycle and rode without training wheels for the first time. Marcus was so happy when he found out he cried with joy." The letter continued describing the day in detail, everyone's reactions, the gifts she had received. It was as if Grace had been present, even while absent. "She wrote to you on every important day," explained Marcus, "birthdays, graduations, even when you were sick or going through some difficulty. It was her way of keeping our family connection." Sarah quickly flipped through other letters. There were hundreds of them, covering practically her entire life. The dedication and love evident in every written word were overwhelming. Why did she never deliver these letters? Because she was afraid you would ask questions she wouldn't know how to answer, and also because she thought it would be selfish of her to try to maintain a connection that might confuse you or cause problems with David and Linda. Did David and Linda know you kept corresponding? They knew and approved. They understood that Grace needed some way to follow your life. Sometimes they even deliberately passed information to her. "David once told me he considered you the daughter of 4 parents, not 2. This information brought some relief to Sarah. At least there was no betrayal or deceit among the adults who raised her. They were all cooperating to give her the best life possible under difficult circumstances. "Marcus, can I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "Did you never try to have other children? Did you never officially marry someone else?" Marcus smiled sadly. "I never could. Grace was the great love of my life, and you were the daughter I always dreamed of having. After you left my life, I tried a few relationships, but I could never emotionally commit to another person. That must have been very lonely." "It was. But I chose that path. And I always knew it was worth it, because you grew up and became exactly the kind of person I hoped you would be." Sarah stood up and walked around the room, looking again at the photographs of herself at every age. It was unsettling but also touching to realize the level of dedication this man had maintained toward her throughout her life. "Marcus, can I ask about the mountain house? Grace left a letter saying there were more secrets in the attic." "Ah, yes. I helped her build that special hiding place. There's a secret passage behind the main bookshelf that leads to a small attic. Grace kept there. Well, you'll have to see for yourself." "What kind of things?" "Gifts. Gifts she bought for you on all your birthdays and Christmases over these years. Clothes she sewed, toys she carefully chose, books she wanted to share with you. Everything she would have given if she could have been present." The revelation felt like a punch to the gut. Grace had spent decades buying gifts for a daughter she couldn't see, storing them in a secret house in the hope that one day she could deliver them. How many gifts? Hundreds. For every birthday, for every Christmas, for graduations, for special celebrations. Grace never missed an important date. She knew her preferences, her sizes, her tastes at every age. How did she know these things? Linda, and she talked regularly, her mother, her Aunt Mother, understood that Grace needed to maintain some connection and always passed on detailed information about you. What colors you liked, what toys you preferred, what books you were reading in school. Sarah felt torn again between emotion and outrage. On one hand, it was touching to know she had been so loved. On the other hand, it was frustrating to think of all the moments they could have shared together. "Is there anything else I should know?" Marcus hesitated. "There is someone you should meet. Someone who was fundamental in our lives back then." "Who?" "Jennifer. The girl in the picnic photo you must have found. She is your half-sister." Sarah's world spun. "What do you mean, half-sister?" "Jennifer is Grace's daughter from another relationship before ours. She was already 4 when we met, and I raised her as my own daughter during the years we lived together." "Where is she now?" She lives here in the city too. She got married, had children, but never lost touch with Grace. In fact, she has known the whole truth about you from the beginning. Does she know I'm her sister? She does. And she always wanted to get to know you better, but she respected Grace's decision to keep the secret. Now that you've discovered everything—" Marcus didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah understood there was an entire family she didn't know, but who had always known of her existence. "Do you have her phone number?" "I do, but perhaps it's better for the three of us to meet together. There's a lot to talk about, and Jennifer can share details about Grace that I don't know." Sarah's head was spinning with so much information. In less than 48 hours, her entire life had been rearranged. She had discovered that her parents weren't her parents, that her aunt was her mother, that she had a living father who had watched her for decades, and now that she had a sister who had always known of her existence. "Marcus, I need some time to process all this, but I would like to meet Jennifer, yes, and I want to go back to the mountain house to find the gifts Grace stored." "I understand perfectly. This is a lot of information to absorb at once. But I want you to know that regardless of how you feel about me now, I have loved you as a daughter since the day you were born, and nothing can change that." Sarah moved closer to Marcus and for the first time hugged him. It was a hesitant hug at first, but it grew warmer when she genuinely felt the paternal love he had held onto for so many years. I don't know if I can call you Dad yet, but I can try to build a new relationship. Get to know who you really are." "That is more than I ever hoped for," said Marcus, with tears in his eyes, "much more than I ever dreamed possible." They arranged to meet the next day with Jennifer at the mountain house. Marcus said he would call her that very night to explain that Sarah had discovered the truth. It would be a family reunion that had been delayed for over 30 years. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. That night, Sarah called David and Linda, the people she still considered her true parents, regardless of genetics. I needed to hear their version of the story and understand how they felt all these years, keeping such an important secret. David answered the phone, and his voice grew tense when she explained she had discovered the truth. "Sarah, dear, where are you? We need to talk about this in person. I'm still in St. Thomas Ridge, Dad. I found documents at Aunt Grace's property. I talked to people in town. I know everything." There was a long silence on the line before David spoke again. "Your mother and I knew this day would come sooner or later. Grace always said you were too smart and curious to accept things without questioning forever. Why did you never tell me the truth? I had a right to know who my biological family was. Because at the time there were still real risks, and then so much time passed we no longer knew how to broach the subject. How do you explain a lie that lasted decades? Do you regret raising me?" "Sarah," David's voice became firm, "never say such a thing. You were the greatest blessing of our lives. Grace gave us the most precious gift she could give. We raised you with as much love as any biological parents could. And how did you feel knowing that Grace and Marcus kept following my life? We were happy about it. You were loved by 4 adults instead of 2. How many children can say that? Grace never interfered with our parenting, never tried to undermine our authority. She just loved you from a distance." Linda took the phone from David. "Sweetheart, you need to understand there was no malice in our decisions. We did what we believed was best for you under those circumstances." "Mom, I'm not angry with you. I'm confused, but not angry. I know you loved me and took good care of me, but I need to understand the whole story before I decide how I feel about all this. We understand, and we want you to know that no matter what you discover, we will always be your parents. Grace may have given you life, but we gave you love, an education, values. We are a family no matter what the documents say." The conversation with David and Linda brought Sarah some peace. She realized there were no villains in this story, just people who did the best they could in a very difficult situation. Everyone had sacrificed something to protect her and ensure she had a happy life. The next morning, she returned to the mountain house. This time, crossing the suspension bridge was less frightening. She already knew what to expect and had a clear goal. Marcus had given her detailed instructions on how to find the secret passage in the attic. The bookcase that hid the passage was on the wall of the main bedroom. When Sarah moved some specific books in the correct sequence, she heard a mechanical click, and the bookcase shifted a few inches from the wall, revealing a narrow opening. Behind the bookcase was a wooden ladder leading to a small attic. Sarah used her phone's flashlight to light the way. The space was small but well organized, and it was completely filled with wrapped gifts. There were boxes and packages of all sizes, each carefully labeled with a date and occasion. For Sarah, Christmas 1995. For my dear daughter, 10 years old. High school graduation, 21st birthday. The organization was meticulous, as if Grace had planned this moment of discovery for decades. Sarah began to open some of the older gifts: a stuffed animal for when she was 5, a set of children's books she would have loved at 8, handmade clothes in sizes that matched her measurements exactly at each age. But they weren't just material gifts. There were also letters explaining each choice, recounting events that had happened at that time, expressing feelings that Grace could not share in person. In a box marked 16th birthday, there was a delicate gold necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. The accompanying letter explained that Grace had saved for months to buy that special piece, hoping that one day she could gift it to her daughter on the most important date of her adolescence. Sarah Mitchell put the necklace on and continued exploring the gifts. There were clothes for every stage of life, educational toys carefully chosen to stimulate her development, books that Grace believed would be important for her intellectual formation. In a larger box at the back of the attic, she found something even more special: a handmade wedding dress with embroidered details that must have taken months to complete. The attached letter said, "For the most special day of my daughter's life. Even if I cannot be present, I want you to know that I am thinking of you and wishing you all the happiness in the world." The emotion was so intense that Sarah needed to sit on the attic floor to recover. Grace's dedication was extraordinary. She had spent decades preparing gifts for a daughter she could not see, planning moments that might never arrive, keeping alive the hope that one day they could be together. Among the more recent gifts, there was a university graduation ring, exactly like the one Sarah had bought for herself, but this one was engraved with a special message: "For Sarah, with eternal pride from your mother who loves you." At the back of the attic, she found one last box, different from all the others. It was larger, heavier, and was labeled simply as "For when you discover the truth." Inside was a photo album completely different from the ones she had seen before. These photos showed Grace pregnant, the birth at the hospital, Sarah's first days of life, intimate moments between mother and daughter that she had never seen. There were also photos of the 2 years they lived together in the mountain house. Sarah as a baby playing in the secret garden, taking her first steps, being lulled by her mother, interacting with Marcus as a normal family. They were images of a genuine happiness that was interrupted by circumstances. The album also included more recent photos, taken secretly over the years. Sarah at school events, graduations, important moments of her life that were documented by Grace, even from a distance. It was as if she had a complete photographic archive of her daughter, even though she could not be physically present. On the last page of the album, there was a final letter from Grace, this one dated just 1 week before her death. "My dear Sarah," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means the moment of truth has finally arrived. I ask forgiveness for all the years of secrets, but I want you to know that each day away from you was a pain I chose to bear to ensure your safety and happiness." The letter continued, "Do not feel betrayed by those who loved you. David and Linda raised you as I never could have done alone. Marcus never forgot you for a single day. And I watched you grow from afar, proud of every achievement, of every step." The gifts in this attic represent all the love I could not express in person. Each one was chosen imagining your tastes, your needs, your personality at different stages of life. Even without being able to be with you, I tried to be part of your life in every way possible to me. The final part of the letter was the most emotional. "Now that you know the truth, you have a choice to make. You can choose to feel betrayed and push away all of us who love you. Or you can choose to understand that you are loved by more people than most children ever dream of being loved. I hope you choose the second option. Marcus is old and lonely, but he still loves you like the first day. Jennifer always wanted a younger sister to take care of. David and Linda continue to be the wonderful parents they always were. And I can finally rest in peace knowing you know the whole truth and can decide how you want our family to be from now on. Sarah folded the letter carefully, tears streaming down her face. Grace had planned that moment down to the last detail, ensuring all the secrets were revealed gradually and understandably. She spent the rest of the morning exploring the gifts and reading the letters that accompanied each one. It was like reliving her childhood and adolescence from the perspective of a mother watching from a distance, loving unconditionally but unable to interfere directly. Around noon, she heard voices approaching the house. She quickly came down from the attic to find Marcus walking across the suspension bridge, accompanied by a woman she didn't know but immediately recognized from the old photographs. Jennifer must have been in her early 40s, brown hair with a few grey strands, intelligent green eyes, and a warm smile. There was a subtle resemblance to Grace visible in her facial structure and the way she moved. "Sarah," Jennifer said hesitantly, "my little sister." For the first time since discovering the truth, Sarah felt genuinely happy. There was something about Jennifer that inspired immediate trust, perhaps the warm way she smiled, or the natural way she approached for a hug. Jennifer, finally. The hug between the two sisters was long and emotional. Marcus watched with tears in his eyes, finally seeing his two daughters meet after decades of separation. "I always dreamed of this moment," said Jennifer. "I always wanted to meet my younger sister, but I respected Mom Grace's decision to keep the secret." "Tell me about her, about what she was like when you lived together," Jennifer smiled nostalgically. "She was the most dedicated mother you could imagine. Even with all the problems and worries, she always made time for play, for bedtime stories, to help me with homework, and she talked about you constantly." "How so?" "Even after you went to live with Aunt Linda and Uncle David, Mom Grace talked about you every day. She told me what you had done, how you were growing, what new things you had learned. It was as if you lived with us even though you were far away." Marcus joined the conversation. Jennifer was crucial in helping Grace endure the separation. She took care of her sister with motherly affection, while Grace worked to support us. "And you, Jennifer? How did you feel when you found out I existed?" "I was happy. I always wanted a little sister. And even though I couldn't live with you, I always felt proud. Mom Grace showed me your photos, told me about your achievements. I felt like a proud older sister, even from a distance." "Do you have your own family now?" Jennifer nodded. "I've been married for 15 years to a wonderful man named Brian. We have 2 children, Tyler, who is 12, and Emily, who is 9. They know about you and are eager to meet their aunt." The idea that she had nephews she had never met was another shock for Sarah. Her family had expanded exponentially in just a few days. "Do they know the whole story?" "They do. We've always raised them with the truth about our family. We told them that Aunt Sarah lived far away but that we would meet one day. Tyler always asks when he'll get to meet the famous aunt, who is very smart and pretty." Marcus laughed. "Jennifer always talked about you to the kids as if we were a normal family. They grew up knowing they had a special aunt they couldn't visit, but who was part of the family anyway." Sarah felt emotional again. There were children who considered her an aunt, who had grown up hearing stories about her, who were eager to meet her. It was an entire family that existed parallel to the life she knew. "Can I meet them?" "Of course. Actually, they're in town today with Brian. They can come here if you want, or we can meet at our house." "Before that," said Marcus, "I think Jennifer should see what Sarah found in the attic." The 3 of them went up together to Grace's secret hiding place. Jennifer was visibly moved to see the quantity of stored gifts. "She always told me she was buying things for you, but I never imagined it was this much. My goodness, Sarah, she truly never forgot an important date." Jennifer picked up some of the more recent presents and examined them. "Look at this. She knew your exact style, your tastes. How did she get such precise information? Aunt Linda passed details to her regularly, explained Sarah. They talked about me constantly. And Marcus contributed too, added Jennifer. He always brought information about your studies, your professional achievements. Mum Grace knew more about your life than many mothers who live with their children daily. Marcus knelt near one of the boxes. Grace made me promise that I would help you two connect, if the truth ever came to light. She wanted you to be real sisters, not just on paper. What was your relationship like all these years? Sarah asked Jennifer. Marcus was always like a father to me, even after he and Mom Grace separated. He helped pay for my studies, was there for important moments in my life, has known my children since they were born. Our family may have been complicated, but it never ceased to exist. And now? Jennifer smiled. Now it can finally be complete. You, me, Marcus, my children, David and Linda, we're all one big messy family, but full of love. The afternoon was spent with Jennifer and Marcus, telling stories about Grace that Sarah had never heard. They talked about her strong personality, her dedication to her work as a teacher, her love for books and nature, her little habits and quirks. She had a tradition, Jennifer shared. Every year on your birthday she would come here alone and spend the whole day. She'd bring a small cake, light candles, sing happy birthday to you even though you weren't here. Then she'd save a little piece of cake in a container in the freezer. She saved pieces of cake? She did. She said that when you were reunited, you would eat all the birthday cakes together at once. Her freezer was always full of little containers with pieces of cake from your birthdays. The image of Grace saving pieces of cake for decades was deeply touching. It was a gesture that showed an unshakable hope that one day they could be together again. Where are those pieces of cake now? At her house in the city, said Marcus. When she died, we couldn't bring ourselves to throw them away. They're still there. Can we go get them? Jennifer and Marcus exchanged a meaningful look. Of course we can. In fact, there are many other things in her house that you should see. Grace turned the house into a kind of sanctuary dedicated to your memory. They came down from the attic and prepared to leave the mountain house. Sarah carefully locked the door, hanging the key on the same hook where she had found it. Somehow she knew she would return there many times in the future, no longer as an intruder discovering secrets, but as someone who finally understood the meaning of that special place. The return crossing over the suspension bridge was made in contemplative silence. Each was absorbed in their own thoughts about how the revelations of the last few days had changed their lives. For Marcus, it was the end of decades of forced isolation. For Jennifer, it was the fulfillment of a childhood dream. For Sarah, it was the beginning of a new understanding of who she really was. In town, Marcus guided Sarah and Jennifer to a simple but well-kept house on Acacia Drive. It was where Grace had lived her final years, alone but surrounded by memories of her distant daughter. The house was exactly as Grace had left it. Jennifer explained that no one had touched anything since her death, in the hope that one day Sarah could see the place where her biological mother had spent so many years thinking of her. What Sarah found there left her speechless once more. The entire house was like an altar dedicated to her. All the walls were covered with photographs of her at different ages. There were clippings from local newspapers when she had won school awards, copies of her diplomas, even records of her school grades that Linda had shared with Grace. In the main bedroom, there was a desk where Grace apparently spent hours writing. It was covered with letters started but never finished, all addressed to Sarah. They were like one-sided conversations Grace kept with her daughter through writing. She wrote to you almost every day, explained Jennifer. Explained. Sometimes it was just a few lines about the weather or something she had read in the paper. Other times they were long letters talking about missing you and plans for the future. Marcus opened the refrigerator and showed the freezer. As Jennifer had promised, it was filled with small jars labeled Sarah's birthday, 1995, Sarah's birthday, 2000, Sarah's birthday, 2010, and so on. There were more than 20 jars, one for each birthday since they were separated. She really believed that one day you would eat these cakes together? Asked Sarah, moved. She did, confirmed Marcus. And you know what's most amazing? She always said, that when that day came, you would understand why she had to make the choices she did, that you would forgive all the lies and secrets. And was she right? Sarah thought for a long moment. The initial anger she had felt upon discovering the truth was gradually being replaced by a deeper understanding of the complexity of the situation. All the adults involved had made enormous sacrifices out of love for her. I think she was. I'm still processing everything, but I'm starting to understand there was no malice in their decisions, only a great, great deal of love. Jennifer opened one of the kitchen cabinets and took out 3 small plates. How about we eat one of these cakes now? In her honor. The idea was perfect. The 3 of them sat at Grace's kitchen table and shared a piece of cake that had been stored for 15 years. The cake was obviously dried out and tasteless after so long in the freezer, but the symbolism of the moment was extraordinary. To Grace, toasted Marcus, raising a glass of water. To Mom, said Jennifer. To my mother, said Sarah, using for the first time the word that still sounded strange to her, but increasingly natural. After eating the symbolic cake, Jennifer suggested they go to her house so Sarah could meet her nieces and nephews. Marcus said he would accompany them, but that later he would need to return home to rest. The emotions of the day had been too intense for a man of his age. Jennifer's house was cozy and full of life. Tyler and Emily were playing in the backyard when they arrived, but they ran inside as soon as Jennifer called. They were beautiful children, with bright intelligence in their eyes and warm smiles. Tyler, Emily, come meet Aunt Sarah. The children approached curiously, clearly prepared for this moment. Tyler, the oldest, was the first to speak. Hi, Auntie. Mommy always talks about you. You're Grandma Grace's daughter, right? The naturalness with which the child referred to the complicated family situation showed how Jennifer had managed to raise her children with a healthy understanding of the family history. Yes, I am, Tyler, and you must be the smart boy who wants to be an engineer when you grow up. Tyler's eyes lit up. You know that? Did Mommy tell you? Yes, she did. And she also told me you're very good at math. Emily, the youngest, tugged on Sarah's shirt. Auntie, are you going to live here now? Mommy said you lived very far away, but I wanted you to live close by. The innocence of the question touched Sarah deeply. Those children had immediately accepted her as family, without questions or complications. To them, she was simply the aunt who had finally arrived. I don't know yet where I'll live, Emily, but now that I know you, I'll visit often. How about that? Cool, can I show you my drawings? I drew a picture of our family that has you in it too. Emily ran to get her drawings and returned with a colorful paper where she had drawn several stick figures. In the drawing, there were clearly Jennifer, Brian, Tyler, herself, Marcus, and a female figure labeled Aunt Sarah. I always knew you existed, explained Emily. Mommy showed me pictures of you and said that one day we would meet. That's why I put you in the family drawing. Brian, Jennifer's husband, arrived home in the late afternoon. He was a friendly and welcoming man who greeted Sarah as if he had known her for years. Jennifer had clearly prepared the entire family for this moment. Sarah, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Jennifer talks about you so much it's as if you were already part of our daily lives. How did you manage to explain the situation to the children? With honesty, adapted to their age, explained Brian. We said there was a complicated story in the family, that some people had to stay away from each other for a while, but that everyone loved each other very much. The children accepted it naturally. During dinner, Sarah felt genuinely at home for the first time since her life had been turned upside down. Jennifer's family had absorbed her without hesitation, as if she had always been there. Tyler talked about school, his friends, and his plans for the future. Emily showed her favorite toys and insisted that Sarah help give her dolls a bath. Brian talked about his work as a history teacher at the local school and how he sometimes told his students about the importance of preserving family stories. Speaking of which, said Jennifer, there's something I forgot to mention. Mom Grace left a specific will about the mountain house. She wanted the house to be kept in the family, passing to you, then to me, and then to the children. She wanted the house to continue being a place for family gatherings. Exactly. Grace dreamed that one day that house would be used for family reunions, that it would be a place where we could all meet to keep our family history alive. The idea was perfect. The house that had held so many secrets could become a place of unity and celebration for the family, finally reunited. "And there's one more thing," added Jennifer. Grace left money set aside specifically for renovations to the mountain house. She wanted it to be modernized, to have proper security, to be a comfortable place where the whole family could gather. How much money? Quite a lot. Grace saved for decades, living very simply, all so she could leave an inheritance that would allow her dream of reuniting the family to come true. Marcus, who had remained quiet for most of the dinner, finally spoke. "Grace planned every detail of this reunion. She knew you would discover the truth sooner or later, and wanted to make sure that when it happened we would all be prepared to become a real family. How could she be so sure things would work out? Because she knew you better than you think," said Jennifer. "Even from a distance, she watched your personality form, your values develop. She knew you were someone capable of forgiving, of understanding, of embracing love even when it comes in complicated ways." After dinner, the children insisted that Sarah help them with their homework. Tyler was studying United States history and was fascinated when he discovered Sarah had studied at university. Emily was learning to write and asked for help writing a letter to Grandma Grace in heaven. "What do you want to tell Grandma?" asked Sarah. "I want to say that Auntie finally came home and that our family is complete now." The child's simplicity and wisdom brought tears to the eyes of all the adults present. In a way, Emily had perfectly summarized the meaning of everything that had happened in the last few days. When it was time for the children to go to sleep, they both insisted that Sarah tuck them in. She read them stories, helped pick out their clothes for the next day, and took part in all the little routines that make up family intimacy. "Aunt Sarah," said Emily when the lights were turned off, "are you going to be our aunt forever now?" "Yes, my dear, forever." "And are you going to come to our birthday parties?" "I won't miss a single one." After the children fell asleep, the adults sat on the porch to talk more. The night was clear, with stars visible despite the small town's light pollution. "Sarah," said Jennifer, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How do you feel about all this? About discovering that your whole life was based on a well-intentioned lie?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "At first I felt angry, then confused, then sad for all the moments we lost together. But now I feel mostly grateful." "Grateful?" "For having been loved by so many people, for having had dedicated parents like David and Linda, a birth mother who loved me unconditionally even from a distance, a father who never forgot me, a sister who always wanted to know me. How many people can say they were loved by so many?" Marcus was visibly moved. "Grace was right about you. She always said that when you knew the truth, you would understand it was all done out of love. And you? How do you feel now that the secret is out?" Jennifer sighed, relieved. "I carried that weight my entire adult life. I always wanted my little sister nearby, but I respected Mum's decision. Now I can finally have the sister I always dreamed of having." "And I feel complete," said Marcus. "For decades, I had to pretend you didn't exist, that you weren't important to me. Now I can openly admit that you are my daughter, and that I'm proud of who you've become." Brian, who had been observing the conversation silently, finally spoke up. "As someone outside the situation, I can say you are an extraordinary family. The amount of love and sacrifice involved in this story is impressive. You should be proud of how you managed to protect Sarah and yet keep the family united, even if separated." The conversation went on late into the night. They talked about plans for the future, about how to gradually integrate Sarah into everyday family life, about renovations to the mountain house, about ways to honor Grace's memory. "There's one thing I'd like to propose," said Sarah. "How about we organize an annual party at the mountain house on Grace's birthday to celebrate her life and our family reunion?" "Perfect idea," agreed Jennifer immediately. "We can invite David and Linda too. After all, they're as much a part of the family as we are." "And we can use the gifts that Grace saved," suggested Marcus. "Open one each year, as if we were recovering all the lost birthdays." The idea of annual celebrations gave a sense of continuity and purpose to the whole situation. The family wouldn't just reunite, but would create new traditions based on the love that had always existed between them, even when apart. When Sarah finally returned to the inn where she was staying, her head was full of plans and positive emotions. In less than a week, her life had been completely transformed, but in a way that made her feel more complete than ever. The next morning, she called David and Linda to tell them about the events of the previous day. They were moved to learn that she had met Jennifer and the nephews and expressed interest in participating in future family gatherings. "Sweetheart," said David, "we want you to know we're happy you discovered the truth. And we want to meet Marcus and Jennifer too. After all, we're all family now. You really want to meet them?" "Of course we do," confirmed Linda. "Marcus and Grace gave us the greatest gift of our lives when they allowed us to raise you. It's time to thank them in person." The generosity and maturity of David and Linda once again confirmed for Sarah that she had been raised by extraordinary people. They showed no jealousy or resentment at having to share their daughter with her biological family, only joy at seeing her happy. Sarah spent the following days getting to know her newly discovered family better. She visited Marcus daily, hearing stories about his youth and about the years he and Grace spent together. She helped Jennifer with the children, participating in family routines as if she had always been there. She also returned several times to the mountain house, exploring every corner and planning the necessary renovations. Marcus accompanied her on some of these visits, showing her construction details and explaining how he and Grace had planned every aspect of the house. "This window here," he pointed to a specific opening in the rock, "was positioned so the morning sun would light up your crib when you were a baby. Grace insisted you needed to wake up with natural light every day." Every detail of the house revealed the level of care and planning her biological parents had dedicated to creating a perfect environment for her. It was touching, but also a painful reminder of how circumstances had destroyed that domestic happiness. During one of the visits, Sarah decided to test the suspension bridge more carefully. Marcus explained that the structure would need significant repairs to be safe for regular family use, especially with children. "I can hire engineers to assess the bridge," offered Marcus. Grace left enough money to make all the necessary improvements. She wanted this place to be safe and comfortable for future generations of the family. Future generations? She always dreamed that you would have children one day, and that they would also use this house. She wanted it to become a family tradition passed down from generation to generation. The idea of having her own children, who would grow up knowing the complete family history, was moving. Their future children would never have to discover painful secrets about their identity. They would grow up knowing exactly where they came from and who loved them. 1 week after her first visit to the town, Sarah organized a special dinner at Jennifer's house. She invited David and Linda to come from their hometown to meet Marcus and Jennifer's family. It would be the first conscious gathering of the entire family. The dinner began with some tension. David and Marcus, in particular, seemed unsure how to interact. After all, one had raised the other's daughter for decades. There was potential for jealousy, resentment, or discomfort. But Tyler and Emily, in their childhood innocence, quickly broke any tension. They treated David and Linda as additional grandparents, asking questions, showing toys, requesting stories about Sarah when she was little. "Grandpa David," said Emily, "Mommy said you taught Aunt Sarah how to ride a bike. Can you teach me too?" The children's naturalness quickly spread to the adults. David and Marcus began exchanging stories about Sarah, discovering that both had witnessed the same developmental milestones, just from different perspectives. "When she was 10, David shared, she became obsessed with books about astronomy. She would read about planets and stars for hours." "I knew that," exclaimed Marcus. "Grace told me, and I bought a small telescope for her, but never knew how to give it to her. I still have it stored at home." "Really? I always wanted to give her a telescope, but thought it was too expensive at the time," admitted David. "Why don't we give it to Tyler?" suggested Marcus. "He likes science too." The moment David and Marcus decided to collaborate to gift Tyler marked a turning point in the family dynamic. They realized that instead of competing over Sarah's past, they could work together to create a positive future for the whole family. Linda and Jennifer also connected quickly. They discovered that both had carried similar worries about Sarah over the years and had much in common in terms of family values and educational approaches. "I always wondered how Grace was handling the separation," Linda confessed to Jennifer. "I felt guilty for having her daughter with me." "And I always wondered if you were taking good care of her," replied Jennifer. "Grace would tell me things, but a daughter always worries." The dinner stretched late into the night, with everyone sharing stories, making plans, and laying the foundation for a new family dynamic. By the end of the evening, it was clear there would be no divisions or competitions, only a large, loving family that had found a way to come together after decades of separation. A few weeks later, Sarah made an important decision. She would move to St. Thomas Ridge permanently. She wanted to be near her newly discovered family and personally oversee the renovations on the mountain house. "Are you sure?" asked David when she announced the decision. "You have an established life here, a career, friend." "I'm sure, Dad. I can work remotely or find new opportunities there. But I want to cherish every moment I can with family. We've already lost too much time." David and Linda supported the decision, though it was hard for them to see her go. But they arranged regular visits and planned to spend holidays in St. Thomas Ridge, joining the family gatherings at the mountain house. Sarah's move to the town was celebrated by the whole family. Marcus helped her find a house to rent near Jennifer's. The children were thrilled at the prospect of having their aunt living nearby. Jennifer would finally have the sister she always wished for by her side in daily life. Sarah's first months in town were an experience of gradual integration into the local community. She quickly made friends, found freelance work opportunities, and settled into the routine of small-town life. But the most important project was the renovation of the mountain house. Marcus hired the best engineers in the region to assess the structure. The suspension bridge was completely rebuilt with modern materials and safety systems. The house itself received plumbing and electrical upgrades, but maintained its historical character and rustic charm. The secret attic was expanded and transformed into a family memory room, where all of Grace's gifts were displayed alongside photographs and documents of family history. It was like a private museum dedicated to the love and sacrifice that had shaped their lives. During the renovations, more secrets hidden by Grace were discovered. Behind a false wall in the kitchen, they found a small library with books she had specifically selected for Sarah, from children's literature to complex works of philosophy and science that she believed her daughter would appreciate when she grew up. "She really planned everything," said Jennifer, flipping through some of the books. "Look at the notes in the margins. She wrote comments and questions as if she were having an ongoing intellectual conversation with you." The books contained hundreds of margin notes where Grace expressed thoughts she wished to share with her daughter, questions for discussion, recommendations for related readings. It was as if she had created a personalized educational curriculum based on her observations of Sarah's personality and interests. 6 months after the initial discovery of the truth, the family organized the first official celebration at the renovated mountain house. It was Grace's birthday, and everyone was present. Sarah, Marcus, Jennifer, Brian, Tyler, Emily, David, and Linda. The house had been transformed into a welcoming and safe space, yet it retained all its magic and historical significance. The bridge was now solid and reliable, allowing even the children to cross without fear. For the celebration, each person brought something special. Sarah prepared a photo album documenting the months since she had discovered the truth. Jennifer brought flowers from Grace's garden. Marcus brought a cake made with Grace's favorite recipe. David and Linda brought letters that Grace had written to them over the years, expressing gratitude for raising Sarah with so much love. The children prepared drawings and small crafts in honor of Grandma Grace, even though they had never met her in person. To them, she was a legendary family figure, someone whose love had made it possible for everyone to be reunited. "I'd like to propose a toast," said Marcus, raising a glass of wine, "to Grace, who taught us that true love sometimes requires impossible sacrifices, but never dies." "To Grace," everyone echoed. During the party, they opened some of the gifts that Grace had stored in the attic. It was moving to see Sarah finally receive the presents that had been chosen with such affection decades ago. Even the childhood gifts held special meaning. They represented moments from her childhood that her birth mother had observed and celebrated from afar. Tyler and Emily were fascinated by the family history and insisted that Marcus tell more details about how he and Grace had built the house. The children began to see Marcus as a heroic figure who had built a magical castle on a mountain for his family. "Grandpa Marcus," asked Emily, "can you build a house just like this for me when I grow up?" "Of course I can, Princess. Where do you want me to build it?" "On the moon. That way no one can bother us." The children's laughter filled the house with joy, creating new happy memories to replace the decades of secrets and longing. As the night progressed, the adults gathered on the porch to talk while the children played. The view of the moonlit valley was spectacular, and the feeling of peace and wholeness was palpable. "Grace would have been so happy to see this," said Jennifer, watching the family gathered. "She is seeing it," replied Linda with conviction. "Somehow, she is here with us." "What do you think she would say if she could speak to us now?" asked Sarah. Marcus thought for a moment. "I think she would say we are all forgiven for the necessary lies, and that now we can begin to live the life she always dreamed we would have, a life based on truth and open love." "And she'd probably complain that it took us too long to come together," added Jennifer, laughing. "She was always impatient with things she considered obvious." The conversation flowed naturally to future plans. They decided they would have regular family gatherings at the mountain house, not just on Grace's birthday, but whenever anyone wanted to bring the family together. The house would become a permanent meeting point, a place where future generations would learn about their history and the importance of preserving family bonds even in difficult circumstances. "There's something I want to say to all of you," announced Sarah as the gathering was coming to an end. "All my life, I thought I had a small, simple family. Now I've discovered I have a huge and complicated family, but one full of love. And I wouldn't change anything that happened." "Not even the lies?" asked David. "Not even the lies, because now I understand they were lies told out of love, to protect me, and they resulted in a life full of people who love me unconditionally." "How many people can say that?" Marcus was visibly moved. "Grace was right about you from the start. She always said you were special, that you had a heart big enough to love an entire family, no matter how complicated." "And now we have the family she always dreamed we would have," concluded Jennifer. The first celebration at the mountain house established a tradition that would continue for many years. At each gathering, new aspects of the family history were revealed, new memories were created, and the bonds between everyone grew stronger. In the following months, Sarah settled completely into her new life. She developed a successful career offering online consulting services, leveraging her previous experience, but with the flexibility to work from her new town. She became a constant presence in the lives of Tyler and Emily, attending school recitals, soccer games, and all the small activities that make up everyday family life. Her relationship with Marcus also deepened gradually. At first, it was still difficult to see him as a father. After all, David had always occupied that role in her life. But slowly, she began to appreciate having two father figures, each offering different perspectives and types of support. Marcus proved especially skilled at giving practical advice about business and finances, thanks to his experience as an entrepreneur. David continued to be her emotional safe harbor, the person she called when she needed comfort or personal guidance. Both roles were important and complementary. The relationship with Jennifer blossomed naturally into a deep sisterly friendship. They discovered they had very complementary personalities. Jennifer was more spontaneous and emotional, while Sarah was more analytical and a planner. Together, they made a formidable team for solving family problems and organizing events. 1 year after the discovery of the truth, Sarah received a marriage proposal from a man she had met through friends in St. Thomas Ridge. Nathan was a literature teacher at the local school, a sensitive and intelligent man who had grown up hearing stories about the Mitchell family and their mysterious house on the ridge. "It's funny," Nathan commented during the marriage proposal. "I spent my childhood imagining what the person living in the enchanted house on the ridge would be like. I never thought I'd one day fall in love with her." Sarah's wedding was planned to take place at the house on the ridge, naturally. It would be the first wedding celebrated in that special place, marking a new chapter in the family's history. Aunt Grace had even left the perfect wedding dress waiting in the attic, as if she knew that day would come. The ceremony was intimate, with only the closest family present. Marcus had the honor of walking Sarah down the aisle, while David officiated the civil ceremony. Jennifer was the maid of honor, and Tyler and Emily were the ring bearer and flower girl. Linda and Brian took charge of the floral decorations, using flowers from the secret garden that Grace had planted decades ago. During the ceremony, Sarah held a bouquet that included dried flowers found among Grace's belongings, flowers that Marcus had given her during the time they lived together. It was a symbolic way to include her biological mother in the celebration. "Grace would be so proud," Marcus whispered during the ceremony. "She always dreamed of seeing you happy and loved." The wedding reception was a celebration not only of Sarah and Nathan's union, but of the Mitchell family itself and their extraordinary journey. Stories were told, tears were shed, and new chapters of the family saga began to be written. During the honeymoon, Sarah and Nathan traveled to the town where David and Linda lived, so Nathan could get to know better the parents who had raised his wife. It was important to Sarah that Nathan fully understood the complexity of her family and the crucial role David and Linda had played in her upbringing. "Your family is extraordinary," Nathan commented after meeting everyone. "The amount of love and sacrifice involved in your story is impressive. I feel honored to be a part of it." 2 years after the wedding, Sarah and Nathan received the news that they were expecting their first child. The pregnancy brought a new dimension to the whole family. This would be the first child of the new generation, growing up knowing the whole truth about their family heritage from the very beginning. Tyler and Emily were thrilled at the prospect of having a baby cousin. They immediately volunteered to help with everything baby-related, from choosing names to decorating the nursery. "Aunt Sarah," Emily said during a visit, "when the baby is born, are you going to tell them about Grandma Grace?" "We'll tell them everything, Emily. About Grandma Grace, about Grandpa Marcus, about Grandpa David and Grandma Linda, about our whole special family." "Cool. That way they'll know they are very loved from the very beginning." Emily's childlike wisdom once again perfectly captured the spirit of the family. The next generation would grow up knowing exactly where they came from and how many people loved them, without ever having to discover painful secrets about their identity. During the pregnancy, Sarah spent a lot of time at the house on the ridge, organizing the rooms so they could be used by future generations of the family. What had begun as a secret refuge was turning into a true family home, where grandparents, parents, and children could gather regularly. Marcus, now over 70, was especially moved by the prospect of officially becoming a grandfather. He had missed the chance to raise Sarah, but he wouldn't miss the chance to know and spoil his grandchild. "I want to teach this baby everything," he said during a conversation with Nathan. "How to build things with their hands, how to care for plants, how to observe the stars. All the things I couldn't teach Sarah. And she'll have Grandpa Marcus and Grandpa David to teach her different things," observed Nathan. "What a lucky child." When the baby was finally born, a beautiful girl who was named Grace in honor of her great-grandmother, the whole family gathered at the St. Thomas Ridge maternity ward. It was the first time in decades that everyone was together for a truly joyful occasion, without secrets or complications. Little Grace was taken home to the mountain house for a special blessing. Marcus had built a wooden crib by hand, using traditional techniques he had learned from his own father. David and Linda brought baby clothes they had specially knitted for their granddaughter. Jennifer organized a welcome party with the entire extended family. "Welcome to the world, little Grace," said Marcus, holding the baby for the first time. "You will grow up knowing exactly who you are and where you came from, and you will be loved by more people than you can imagine." Tyler and Emily immediately became fervent protectors of their baby cousin. They took turns helping with simple tasks like holding the bottle, changing diapers, and singing lullabies. It was touching to see how the baby's arrival brought the family even closer together. "Now our family is truly complete," observed Jennifer during little Grace's baptism. "We have all generations represented, and everyone knows the whole truth." The baptism ceremony was held at the local church, but the celebration took place at the mountain house. It was important that little Grace's first major life celebration happen in the place that symbolized the reunion and love of the Mitchell family. During the party, Linda gave an emotional speech. This little baby will grow up with something most children don't have, the absolute certainty that she is loved. She will have 4 great-grandparents, 2 grandfathers, 2 grandmothers, uncles, aunts, cousins, and devoted parents. But most importantly, she will grow up knowing the story of love and sacrifice that made her existence possible. And one day, added Marcus, when she is old enough, we will tell her about great-grandmother Grace, who built this special place and kept so much love here that we can still feel her presence. As the years passed, the Mountain House truly became the heart of the Mitchell family. Regular gatherings happened not only on special dates, but whenever someone needed family connection. It was a place where problems were discussed and resolved, where traditions were kept alive, where new generations learned about their emotional heritage. Tyler grew up and became a talented engineer, specializing in sustainable construction in difficult locations, clearly inspired by his family's extraordinary house. Emily developed a love for literature and history, dedicating herself to documenting and preserving the history of the Mitchell family for future generations. Little Grace grew up surrounded by stories about her namesake great-grandmother, developing a curious and affectionate personality that reminded everyone of the woman in whose honor she had been named. She learned to cross the suspension bridge at age 5, always accompanied by adults, and considers the Mountain House her favorite place in the world. When little Grace turned 6, she asked a question that surprised everyone during a family gathering. "Grandpa Marcus, why couldn't great-grandma Grace stay with Aunt Sarah when she was little?" Marcus looked at Sarah, silently asking if she was ready for the child to know the whole truth. Sarah nodded. "Because some bad people didn't want them to be a happy family," Marcus explained carefully. "So great-grandma Grace made a very brave choice to protect Aunt Sarah." "What choice?" "She let other people raise Aunt Sarah, so she would be safe. But he never stopped loving her for a single day." Little Grace thought about that for a moment. "Great-grandma Grace was very brave, wasn't she? She was the bravest person I've ever known. And that's why you made this special house? To keep her love safe?" "Exactly, Princess. This house keeps great-grandma Grace's love safe, and now it keeps our whole family's love safe." Little Grace nodded, satisfied with the explanation. To her, the family story was simply one more of the many interesting stories that made up her world. There was no trauma or confusion, just an understanding that her family was special and that love sometimes requires difficult choices. Years later, when Marcus turned 80, the family organized a special celebration at the Mountain House. He was physically frailer, but his mind remained sharp and his dedication to his family unwavering. During the party, Marcus made an important announcement. "I want you all to know that these last years, since our family was reunited, have been the happiest years of my life. Grace was right. True love always finds a way." He paused to wipe his eyes before continuing. "And I want you to know that when my time comes, I will be at peace. Because I got to see my daughter grow into an extraordinary woman. I met my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and I saw our family become exactly what Grace dreamed it would be." "Grandpa Marcus," said little Grace, "you're not going anywhere. You have to stay here to teach me how to build houses in the mountains." Marcus laughed and hugged his great-granddaughter. "I'll teach you everything I know, Princess, and when you grow up, you'll be able to build houses even more amazing than this one." Marcus's birthday party became another important family tradition. Everyone gathered to honor the man who had sacrificed so much for love and who had lived long enough to see his family reunited and thriving. When Marcus passed away peacefully 5 years later, at 85, the entire family was present. His last words were, "Tell Grace we finally made it." Marcus's funeral was a celebration of life in the style he would have approved of. The ceremony took place at the local church, but the wake was held at the Mountain House. People from all over the region came to pay their respects to the man who had become a local legend, the businessman who had built an impossible house on a mountain to express his love. "Dad Marcus lived to see our family complete," said Jennifer during the eulogy. "He kept every promise he made to Mom Grace. Now they can finally be together again." Little Grace, now 11, insisted on planting a special tree in the Mountain House garden in memory of Marcus. "That way, he'll always be here with us," she explained with the wisdom she had inherited from her great-grandmothers. In the years that followed, the Mountain House continued to be the center of family life. Sarah and Nathan had 2 more children, a girl named Jennifer after the aunt, and a boy named David after the paternal grandfather. Tyler married a fellow engineer and started his own family. Emily became a talented writer, specializing in family stories and preserved memories. The Mitchell family grew and branched out, but maintained its unity through regular gatherings at the Mountain House. New traditions were created. Every child learned to cross the suspension bridge on their 10th birthday as a rite of passage. Every teenager spent a night alone in the house as part of their transition to adulthood. Every couple who married in the family included flowers from Grace's garden in their ceremony. Little Grace grew up and became a young woman determined to follow in the footsteps of her ancestors. She studied architecture and engineering, specializing in sustainable construction in challenging locations. Her final project was a proposal to expand the Mountain House so it could comfortably accommodate up to 50 people during family gatherings. "I want our home to be able to host all future generations of the Mitchell family," she explained during her project presentation. "No matter how large our family grows, we will always have a place to gather and remember where we came from." The project was approved with distinction, and the expansion was implemented over the following years. The Mountain House became an even more impressive structure, with additional dormitories, a large dining room, an entertainment center for the children, and even a small museum dedicated to the family's history. But the heart of the house remained the same. The attic where Grace had stored decades of love, the room where the secrets were finally revealed, the porch where the family gathered to talk and plan the future. When Sarah turned 50, she reflected on the extraordinary journey her life had taken since that first walk along the hidden trail. "If someone had told me 20 years ago that I would discover my entire life was based on a well-intentioned lie, I would have been terrified," she said during her birthday party at the Mountain House. "But now I know that sometimes the most important lies are the ones told out of love." "And sometimes," added the young Grace, now graduated and beginning her own career, "the most beautiful truths are the ones that take a lifetime to be revealed." David and Linda, now in their 80s, were present at the celebration, still vibrant and dedicated to the family they had helped raise and keep together. "You know," said David during a toast, "when Grace asked us to raise Sarah, we thought we were just helping in a difficult situation. We never imagined we were helping to build such an extraordinary family." "Grace was right about everything," Linda agreed. "True love always finds a way. Sometimes it takes time, sometimes it demands impossible sacrifices, but it always finds a way." Sarah's 50th birthday party became a celebration not just of her life, but of the entire Mitchell family and their journey through decades of secrets, revelations, reunions, and unconditional love. During the party, Jennifer announced that she had begun writing a book about the family's history, based on Grace's diaries, Marcus's memories, and the experiences of everyone who lived through the events. "Our story needs to be preserved," she explained, "not just for our family, but as an example of how love can overcome any obstacle, of how families can be rebuilt even after decades of separation." Emily, now an established writer, offered to help with the research and editing of the book. "This is a story that deserves to be told properly," she said. "It's about love, sacrifice, forgiveness, and the importance of never giving up on the people we love." The book, when finally published years later, became a regional and eventually national bestseller. The Mountain House, a story of love and reunion, touched thousands of readers and inspired other families to face their own secrets and challenges with courage and understanding. Grace became famous in the region as the Mountain House Girl, but she used her celebrity to promote causes related to preserving family stories and the importance of keeping cultural traditions alive. "Every family has its stories," she said in an interview. "Some are more dramatic than others, but they all deserve to be preserved and honored. That is how we maintain our humanity and our connection to our roots." End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this moving story. Do you believe that true love always finds a way, as it did for the Mitchell family? Leave your opinion in the comments, and if you liked it, Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more touching stories.